So thank you for coming again, and I'm just gonna talk to you a little bit of who I am and what I've done and what I intend of doing. I am a new Ad Astra assistant professor in the School of Agriculture. I only started in September, and so even though I've been in SBS before for almost 5 years, so most people will know me or have heard me in a way. Uh, I'm kind of starting a new period, and I'm starting a theory new lab, so I'm keen to show you what I want to do and see if there's any collaborations that may arise. So my background, weirdly, even you wouldn't say it, considering my last few years of work, I'm a marine biologist. I specialized during my PhD in seabird movement ecology. And that's how I got my experience in studying animal behavior through movement, which is applicable to other species other than seabirds as well. And during my first postdoc, I got introduced to species management and human-wildlife conflict because I worked on a project dealing with bycatch of seabirds in longliner in fisheries. And so that's my introduction to kind of the human aspect of ecology and conservation. And I eventually, because I needed them as a method rather than because of an outright interest of myself, I ended up going through the route of statistical ecology and quantitative methods. So I gained quite a lot of expertise in modeling species distribution and animal movement as well, which has kind of underpinned everything that I've done since. A little bit more of background of how I got here from there. This is another picture of me rolling around with animals on the ground. This is kind of a thing that I like to do, whether it's birds or deer. I ended up working in SBS in 2021 as a postdoctoral researcher, participating in a project that was studying the distribution of deer in Ireland, because at the time it was quite unknown how many were there and where they were distributed in the Dr. Simone Ciuti's lab. And then I moved on to studying the distribution of badgers and their involvement in the bovine tuberculosis ecosystem in Ireland, which there's a lot in there that we could discuss, but that's for another day probably. So as I said, when I landed in Ireland, I landed very fortunately in Simone's lab, the Lab of Wildlife Ecology and Behavior. I was surrounded by a fantastic group of people, PhD students, postdocs, Simone, who was the PI of the group, and it was all perfect and beautiful. And then I'm now on my own, and it's a bit daunting and scary. I don't even have a name for what's supposed to be my lab. If anyone has any ideas, I will accept them. In the meantime, this is the working name that we have. I do know, however, what I want to do and where I want to focus my research on. And I'm going to go through these 4 areas a little bit and just see if anyone has an idea that we could collaborate in or a project that could be good to do with this. So first of all, wildlife health, because in theory, my position is Ad Astra Fellow in Wildlife Health and Land Use, which is a mouthful and I'm never using it, but that's in theory the official position. And because of that, I've already have recruited and is going to start in May a PhD student to work on the diet of badgers through stable isotopes. So the idea is that we're going to get sections of the whiskers of badgers that have been culled in the culling program by the Department of Agriculture and analyze the isotopes, stable isotopes of carbon and nitrogen of those whiskers, and that will give us an indication of what badgers are eating. We'll analyze whether the diet is affected by the distribution, by the different culling programs, vaccination, etc., and does it change seasonally? So that's kind of one part of wildlife health. Another part is studying the movement of badgers through GPS tracking. This is something that is happening within the SBS lab where I was in, but it was already ongoing when I moved to Ag, so I'm still involved in that project, and I'm very grateful for that because it's an amazing project and it's so much fun, and it's going back to tracking animal movement, which is the thing that I really like to do. And so we're trying to study whether or when badgers enter in contact with farm environments or with cattle, and is there a lot of badger-to-badger contact, how their movement is affected by different environmental and demographic parameters. And we've only just started deploying collars in badgers, but we had 2 pilot badgers that were tracked in Roscommon, and we have already some data of how they move around. And I mean, everybody knows badgers are very territorial, but it's very clear here what the limits of this territory are. They don't cross rivers, obviously, but they're also quite scared of crossing roads up at the top. And they're quite contained in that territory, at least this one that was tracked for a few months in Roscommon. And that's kind of the idea of what we're doing, and I'm very keen to continue to do with badgers, with deer, with anything that moves. I will happily put a GPS on it. Next bit is biodiversity monitoring. This is something that I was already involved in, again, when I was in the SPS, and I continue to be involved in it by co-supervising with Simone, two PhD students, Liam and Colin. And it's studying the effect of deer on Irish biodiversity. In this picture, this is a fence, and there is one side of the fence that deer have access to and one side of the fence that deer don't have access to. And it's quite clear to see the one that has absolutely nothing on the ground is the one that deer have nibbled all of the understory from. And so they and a large group of people in Simone's lab are studying in a big project the effect of deer on Ireland's biodiversity, and I'm helping out with these two. Where are the deer more abundant in Ireland with quantifying densities, and then what is the effect they have in birds, in soil diversity, in plant diversity, and in agriculture as well, which kind of links to the School of Ag, which is great for me. And then another thing that I'm interested in doing, although I don't have an ongoing project at the moment, but I do have plans that I'm excited to put in place, and I might draw on collaboration from the School of Agriculture for this, is monitoring biodiversity in agro ecosystems. So which sustainable agriculture practices are better for promoting biodiversity, for example, or how can we improve biodiversity in all types of agriculture, or how do different forestry practices affect the diversity of birds, of mammals, of other species. And we can do that relatively easily by deploying camera traps and sound recorders that can help us quantify the diversity of mammals and birds. And I have already a plan to acquire cameras and sound recorders, and I'm happily deploying them to whatever farm I can have access to. So future plan, but that's kind of one of the things that I really want to do. Additionally, species conservation. I've worked in Ireland with deer and badger, which are of management concern, but the concern is so much for the species conservation. It's about how to manage their conflict with human existence. So in an attempt to work on more purely conservation-based projects, I tried, and I am getting involved with a new Hedgehog Conservation Ireland initiative that was launched a couple of weeks ago. I went to the launch event, and there was plenty of avenues for research and a lot of opportunities for citizen science. Hedgehogs are a very iconic species, but it's very little is known about their abundance and distribution and status in Ireland. And so this project, mirroring itself a little bit in the UK Hedgehog Conservation Project, is trying to set something up, and I'm very keen on participating on it and finding some avenues for research within it. Another avenue for research that I'm trying to work on and looking for funding for is in conservation of pine martens. Simone, and then he passed it on to me, got contacted by the Vincent Wildlife Trust because there was some conflict with pine martens setting up residence in people's attics, and they were quite annoyed by it, as you would expect. They're quite noisy. And so they're trying to figure out why some particular houses get more affected by this, and how can we make the pine martens inhabit artificial nests that we put outside. And all of that could be done through a master's or a PhD project, and they have some funding, but I kind of looking for some more extra funding. So that's one thing that I'm trying to work on as well. If anyone has any money laying around, has nothing to do with it, just let me know. And finally, and this is not a theme per se, this is kind of something the same as the statistical ecology and the methodology that underpins everything that I do, is to do science towards management. So to do research that has real life impacts, and this is an example of something that we did with Simone. I am putting this pin on ourselves. It might not be a direct link, but we did the deer distribution project, and we kind of did an entire workshop with stakeholders and government explaining the distribution of deer in Ireland and what the risks of that was. And a few months later, there was a call for a deer management strategy, and a whole thing was set up that is now in place. I'm not saying there's a direct link between one and the other, but I'm actually kind of saying it here. I'll take that as research that goes towards improving management of species. And so producing outputs in line with management and conservation needs, and having open communications lines with policymakers and stakeholders. It's kind of the whole point of doing this kind of research. There's no point in me figuring out why or how badgers affect TB in cattle and not sharing it with people that can do something about it. So that's kind of the whole point. So that's me. So if you have general wide-ranging research ideas, very specific projects. You need any help or you want any collaborations in terms of statistical ecology, modeling methods, you have money, have any ideas for a lab name or anything else that you think I might be interested in, definitely give me a call or chat to me afterwards. And I'm going to leave you with a badger ambling around because they're really cool. And that is my website and my email. And thank you very much for listening.